My name is Jason Park. I'm sure a lot of you guys are here expecting to hear about emerging markets, but that person couldn't make it, so I'm kind of taking over. And I'm talking about Korea, which is far from an emerging market. It has come to market and is now what we like to call a blood ocean in terms of mobile gaming. But there still are options for self-publishing some ways in South Korea, so I'll go over it very briefly. So, quick introduction of myself. I started a game company in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, a couple of years ago called Tiger Punch. Before that, I was at Blizzard, and recently we merged with a Korean company, and we formed a company called NextTap. So we're a developer slash publisher. So I kind of expected everyone to know what Korea is about, and then last night, or the night before, someone asked if I was from North or South Korea, and I just kind of automatically assumed that everyone would know that I'm not from North Korea, so I kind of added this slide to let people know that I am from South Korea. We are a democracy. We have a big population, huge penetration of mobile games, and pretty good GDP, so the ARPUs are pretty high. So I think you would know Korea mostly these days because of Psy and really high, insanely fast internet speeds. And recently the movie Interview was kind of big. And we have an unnatural obsession with StarCraft, as many of you probably already know. So I'm going to give you a quick overview. There's like a 70%, some say as high as 80% penetration of mobile smartphones. And that pretty much means like anyone who's not really old or really young has a smartphone. So, and most people have unlimited data, so that kind of stuff is not much of a big concern there. They're starting to push 5G in Korea now, so mobile speeds are getting up there. iOS is actually making a comeback with the new iPhone 6. Before, it used to be like all Android, so that's good news. They control about 15% of the market share now. In terms of the store, in terms of hardware, it's actually going up even higher. So we expect that to go up even higher going forward. So Korea is a very, like I said, it's a blood ocean, right? Like everyone wants to go in there. It's the third highest Google Play market size, after US and Japan. It's $1.3 billion estimated last year. And it was growing fast as smartphones started to adoption started to grow, but now it's really slowed down, and it's really dominated by these really big publishers like Netmarble, NHN, Com2uS. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of these companies. The growth has slowed down dramatically. Profits have deteriorated, mostly because of high marketing costs. Typical marketing budget at launch is about 200 to 300,000 US. Therefore, the publishers are no longer looking for casual games. They want games with high ARPU and really good retention. So they're looking for mostly hardcore games. Just within my immediate, circle of colleagues, there's like 6 action RPGs coming out, probably this year alone. The publishers there are very myopic. They look at what's kind of popular now and then kind of invest in developers who are developing very similar games. So if you look at the kind of like the top 40 of the Korean Google Play Store, you'll only notice a handful, like 10 foreign games. So most of them are domestically developed, very Korean style games. There you see like Clash of Clans. They're doing really well everywhere. Korea is actually their second largest market, and there's other games like Boom Beach and stuff as well, and Puzzles and Dragons. But a lot of the top 10 or top 20 is dominated by legacy games like Anipang and games like that, which have been popular since Kakao pretty much first launched. So a lot of times it's kind of like a dash to be in the top 20, in top 50. Not necessarily the top 10, but obviously if you can afford it, then you shoot for the moon. So this is kind of like the daily earnings of the foreign games in Korea. This is kind of extrapolated from raw data that we got from our marketing partner. So if your ranking is #1, then you can expect to make about $700,000 a day, which is not bad. So typically in Korea, how you market a game is boost marketing. So you spend about $50,000 doing pre-registration, PR, viral, and then when you launch, you do incentivize CPI, you bring it up to the top 10, and then by the strength of your game, you see how slowly that kind of goes down. And if it starts to go down, you boost it a little more, and then if it gains traction, you start doing more like traditional marketing, like bus wraps, subways. Mobile game marketing has kind of become more like traditional MMO marketing in Korea. When I was at Blizzard, we would do bus wraps of World of Warcraft, but you would never imagine that a mobile game would do like a whole subway station takeover, but that's very common these days. A lot of celebrity-based marketing. Maybe you recognize some of these stars. A lot of subway and bus wraps. This is not cheap to do this stuff. So I think last year when I was here, there was a lot of talk about cacao, and even in the previous panel, there was a lot of talk about cacao. But there's actually starting to become quite a backlash against cacao because they don't really curate their market very well. So now there's like hundreds of games there, and it's not that much different from just kind of being lost in the crowd of like the Play Store. So a lot of people are kind of moving away from it. So that's just one thing. And then the publishers in Korea are very difficult to work with. They already have invested in a lot of game companies themselves. So they have a lot of games in the pipe, and if they're similar to yours, then they're probably not going to invest in your game. They're not going to publish your game. They're going to try and publish their games that they've invested into. And so then what do you do as a foreign developer who's coming into Korea and wanting to publish? There are a couple of options for you. So you can distribute your game remotely, which is what like Supercell does, or you can work with a publisher, or you can set up your own branch office. Now, branch offices have been successful in the past, but there have been lots of examples of failure. They are very expensive to operate, and it takes a lot of time to find the right people. And obviously, working with a publisher, you guys are very familiar with how difficult that can be. If you guys have the money to and the capability of managing it remotely, then that's obviously very good as well. So, what are some of the alternatives? Well, excuse me. There's a lot of third-tier markets or second-tier markets. Some of them, like the Naver App Store, T-Store, they have like $15 million in revenue. So those can be good things that you can work on. There's not much boosting, so there's no like boost campaign that you have to manage and pay for. They are mostly Android only. Another option is a marketing fund. So these funds were created specifically for marketing purposes, and they're not used for development. So if you're like in middle of development, then these companies will not invest in you. But if you're done with development and you're going to marketing, then they'll give you some of the marketing budget necessary to help with the boost marketing. And a lot of these funds are created by the advertising companies. And they'll look at your game. They want games that have like a proven track record in their home market. So if your game is doing top 50 in China, then they'll look for, then they feel that they can replicate that success in Korea. So then they'll possibly invest in your marketing. So some of the marketing budgets that you can get are as high as like $500,000 if they're confident that you can operate the game remotely, or maybe even set up a branch office or work with a local partner to help you market the game. So that option is there. A third option is to work with a local partner. These are not publishing companies, but they're more like operating companies. So if you have your own marketing budget, these companies will help you to market the game, operate the game, localize it, and they have deep knowledge of the Korean market. So these are three options of publishing in Korea. Unfortunately, there is not much of an indie scene in Korea. Like, you would think that Korea, being the market it is, like the way that it develops games, it would have like a thriving indie scene. But a typical indie studio in Korea already has like 10 people. They're looking for that first $1-2 million investment. So, and games like indie games aren't very successful. There are smaller markets for it. Samsung has a market, their own second-tier store, and they also have a section for indie games. So you can take a look at that as well as an opportunity. But like I said, Korea is a very tough market, very tough to penetrate. But there are alternatives out there. You don't necessarily have to go through one of the major publishers like Come To Us, or if you can, that's great. If that's your market strategy, that's great. But if you're open to kind of looking into alternatives like the second-tier markets and stuff like that, those are definitely available. The marketing funds, like I said, because a lot of them are created by the advertising and the marketing companies themselves, they'll come to you with a very solid go-to-market plan on how to boost your product, how to do all the viability and stuff like that. And then, once again, the third partner option, which is something that if you can meet someone in Korea who is not necessarily a publisher but has experience publishing games, then they can help you with the localization, the go-to-market strategy, and everything you need. So that's it. We're kind of short on time, so I kind of rushed it, but I think I went too fast. So, any questions? Okay.
All right. Thanks very much.